Hello everyone, this is Isidore, and in this video I'll explain the best and worst races to pick in Kenshi as your starting character. I'll also add some notes about whether they're useful as party members, since your faction can explode in size quite a bit, and I don't want to make it seem like some of the races are useless. They're all good at something, to some degree. So let me open by giving the full tier list up front and then explaining my reasoning for each one. At number 1 we have the Shek. At number 2, Greenlanders and Scorchlanders. At number 3, Skeletons. At number 4, Hiver Soldier Drones. At number 5, Hiver Princes. And at number 6, Hiver Worker Drones. Some of you who have existing familiarity with the game may be a bit surprised at these rankings, but hear me out. There's a good reason for my selection, and it mostly boils down to armor and how armor works. Let's start with the Shek. The Shek are kind of a mixed bag if you look at their skills. They clearly make great soldiers and terrible workers, which makes them a good pick for your main character, as you'll likely spend a lot of time adventuring out in the world. And that means you need to be good at combat. They do sadly have penalties to gaining dodge and dexterity, both important combat stats, but it doesn't stop them from gaining those, it just slows down how fast they gain them, which is not a big issue. In addition, Shek also have to eat twice as much as the other races, which is annoying in the first stretch of the game, but quickly becomes irrelevant once you go past a certain amount of wealth and or base building. More importantly, the Shek have 125 hit points on every limb. Not the highest, but here's the thing. Because they have full access to all armor slots, and because they can wear the highest quality armor pieces in the game, i.e. normal human armor, they will likely out-tank everything else. You may be asking, how is that possible when some races have 200 hit points? Well, I'm glad you asked, and in order to understand why Shek are superior when it comes to durability, you must understand how armor works. When you take damage from any source, the game first determines what part of you gets hit. Then it checks for armor coverage. If an armor piece has 100% coverage of the body part that got hit, it always reduces the damage of all attacks against that limb. If the coverage is 50%, you have a 50% chance of the armor reducing incoming damage, or 50% chance of failing to do so. However, a bunch of armor pieces will cover more than just one part of your body. Samurai cloth pants, for instance, cover your legs and your stomach. This is where things get tricky and where the Shek absolutely shine. Let's say you take 80 damage on a limb that has coverage from several armor pieces. The game then starts going through those armor pieces in priority from top to down. So helmets apply first, then body armor, then shirts, and so on and so forth. Checking against each if the blow gets through the coverage check, and then applying however much damage reduction the armor has. This means that if you have two pieces of armor that have 50% damage reduction against the attack you just took, then as long as the attack doesn't go through your armor's coverage, as in it misses the armor and hits an exposed part of your body, the first armor piece will take off 50% reduction to that damage type of that 80 damage that you just took, reducing it to 40 damage. Then the second armor piece, which also has 50% damage reduction against that damage type, as long as that armor piece also gets to the coverage check, it reduces the damage by another 50%, reducing that 40 damage that already got reduced by your armor down to 20 damage. This means that a Shek will be able to make its 125 hit points per limb go much farther than the other races can, as they can't stack these types of damage reductions like Shek can, which makes them the superior warriors. Just with the catch that you will need some high tier armor to make that equation work. Scraps and bandit gear won't cut it, otherwise skeletons will easily out-tank a Shek. As such, the Shek dominate as the tier 1 race of Kenshi. Greenlanders and Scorchlanders are basically in the same boat, enjoying the same armor benefits that the Shek do, but having only 100 hit points per limb, which is why they end up at tier 2. Since both Greenlanders and Scorchlanders have the same hit points per limb and only differ in their skill gains, they're basically equivalent, hence why they're at the same tier. They're a little more forgiving to play than Shek, as they won't starve as fast and aren't as slow at gaining skills in non-combat roles. Greenlanders in particular make great laborers for your settlement or just all-rounders, while Scorchlanders get to be your primary weapon and armor smiths. At tier 3 we have Skeletons. Right out of the gate, Skeletons are the strongest race. With 200 hit points per limb across their entire body, and some good skill modifiers, Skeletons are fantastic warriors and will beat all other races in a straight fight. But that's only before you start adding in armor. The Skeletons have the most restricted armor use of any race in the game, as they can only use the body armor slot and the pants armor slot. While this may not seem like a big deal considering their enormous base hit points per limb, not being able to layer armor to reduce incoming damage several times really hurts Skeletons the further into the game you go. Enemies like beak things and security spiders aren't necessarily a big deal to a well-trained skeleton warrior until you have to take the full force of their attacks on your unarmored head, even if that head has 200 hit points. Furthermore, healing a skeleton character is an absolute pain in the early stages of the game. Skeletons don't use first aid like the other races to fix themselves. Instead, they use robotics, which means that your highly skilled medic can't actually help your skeletons. You need a roboticist for that. Similarly, they also don't use medkits, they require robot repair kits, which are incredibly expensive, costing thousands of cats even for the basic models. Skeletons also cannot rest in a bed to heal their damage at 4 times or 8 times the normal rate, but instead always heal at 2 times the normal rate. That still makes them slightly more dangerous in combat, as they're healing away stun damage really fast compared to other races, but not being able to rest in a normal bed or a roll-up bed to speed up their healing process really sucks, as it means you probably have to loiter around settlements for long periods of time in order to allow your damage to heal. In addition, Skeletons also have an additional mechanic that causes them to slowly lose maximum health the longer they're active, which they cannot recover in any way other than by resting in a skeleton repair bed, which most towns do not have. This means keeping your health up as a skeleton is extremely beginner unfriendly. Understanding all of that, I recommend building a skeleton for dodge tanking. It is the only way to avoid taking those devastating blows on your unarmored pieces and having to pay out of the nose for repairs. Luckily, dodge tanking requires minimal armor, which skeletons won't care too much about anyway, while other races will want to transition into armor tanking as you find better pieces of armor or as your armor smiths start gaining high skill ranks. As an additional note, skeletons do not need to eat, which slightly makes up for their enormous repair costs, and are immune to all forms of acid, making them better suited for exploring certain regions that will melt most of the other races without certain equipment. In addition, unlike other races, which need to be healed with a medkit before they can rest in a bed to speed up their healing process, a skeleton can rest in any skeleton repair bed and heal away all the damage that they took fairly rapidly. The problem is just finding a skeleton repair bed you can use. At tier 4 we have Hiver Soldier Drones. Hivers are not great in general, but the warrior variant is at least good at combat, despite their weird looking heads. With 200 hit points on their heads and 100 everywhere else, they seem like a Greenlander plus at first, but their armor coverage is bad. Not as bad as skeletons, but still bad. They cannot equip boots or helmets, and for their shirt slot are limited to Hiver shirts, which are just worse versions of human shirts. Still, if you want to play one, they aren't a terrible choice. That 200 hit points on their heads will help compensate for the lack of a helmet, and they have a bonus to gaining toughness, which is one of the more dangerous skills to level up, and melee attack, which is one of the more important combat skills. They're also immune to acid, like skeletons, and are one of only 2 races that can eat foul meat, a food item that often drops in bulk from some of the wildlife that exists in the world of Kenshi. They suck at nearly every non-combat role though. If you're looking to hire new members to your faction, you'll often see a lot of Hiver warriors around, but if you don't need more soldiers, they aren't really worth getting. At tier 5 we have Hiver Princes, and this is where you start going into Kenshi but hard mode. And they have similar armor slots to a Hiver warrior, except they can actually wear helmets. Sadly, this does not increase their durability at all, as they only have 80 hit points on all limbs, making them the second most fragile characters in the game. They do gain skill bonuses on a ton of different and useful skills, and are immune to acid, but with how fragile they are, it's hard to justify bringing them into dangerous situations. The odds of losing limbs in combat with these guys is quite high. That being said, they do become good archers faster than anybody else, due to their bonuses to gaining perception and dexterity. Finally, at the bottom of the tier list, Hiver Workers. They're immune to acid, can eat foul meat, and have a ton of skill bonuses, but with their penalty to strength gain, and having only 75 hit points per limb, as well as having the same armor slots as Hive Princes, which aren't the worst but are still subpar, they are, by far, the worst at combat out of any race in the game. That being said, they're cheap to feed if you settle in an area that can yield foul meat for them to eat. They get a lot of bonuses for non-combat skills, making them good farmers and laborers, and as they share a skill gain on the turret skill with skeletons, but are a lot more common, they also make decent guards on the walls of your settlement. Just make sure you have enough turrets to the point where nothing will get through your gates, because those drones are straight up bad in melee. That's my whole tier list. Remember that Kenshi is ultimately a sandbox. If you want to play the one Hiver worker drone who manages to become the deadliest warrior in the wasteland, that's completely up to you. With enough time and effort, you can definitely make that happen. The tier list is just meant to inform people about the details of which picks are better than others. If you have any input, please share it in the comments section below. If you'd like to help my channel grow, please like and subscribe. And if you want to support me in making more videos like this, I also have a Patreon. Link in the description below. Thank you all for watching.